Emily woke up to silence, the kind that feels heavy before you even open your eyes. Her phone was in buzzing. No traffic noise. No reminders from the day waiting to rush in. Then she felt a thin envelope resting against her arm. She sat up fast, heart already beating quicker. Because surprises had become rare in her marriage. And rare things carried weight. Mark stood near the window, hands in his pockets, smiling in a way Emily hadn't seen in years. Not the polite smile he wore at work dinners. Not the tired smile he gave her at the end of long days. This one was different. This one felt like a memory. "Happy anniversary," he said. Emily tore open the envelope. Inside was a boarding pass. Her breath caught when she read the destination. Lake Tahoe. Leaving today. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single word. Tahoe. Their place. Where they had gone before, life got loud. Before schedules replaced conversations, before love turned quiet. Emily laughed, then cried, then hugged Mark so tightly he had to steady himself. "You did this for us." "She asked for you," he said, and she wanted to believe that meant the same thing. The rest of the morning moved fast. Emily packed without thinking, tossing clothes into a suitcase, feeling light, almost young. In the car she watched Mark drive. Noticed how his jaw still tightened when he focused, how his hands still felt familiar when they brushed. She imagined the trip, clearly long walks, shared meals, slow nights where words finally found space again. At the airport, Mark checked his phone often, but Emily ignored it. She didn't want anything to break the feeling. On the plane, she rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't pull away. She closed her eyes and let herself hope. Hope can be fragile. Sometimes it doesn't even make it to baggage claim. As soon as they stepped into the terminal, Emily sensed something shift. Mark slowed his walk. His smile tightened. Then she saw them. 3 men standing near the carousel, loud and relaxed. Dressed like this was just another trip. Ryan noticed them first and waved. Jason followed, already laughing. Luke lifted his phone, probably recording something. Emily stopped walking. Mark cleared his throat. "Surprise," he said again, softer this time. "The guys are here too." The words landed hard. Emily searched his face, waiting for the rest of the sentence. Waiting for a joke. An explanation. Anything that would make this feel less like a mistake. "They're staying at this same resort," Mark added. "I thought it could be fun. Like old times." Old times. Emily nodded because that's what she had learned to do. Nod, smile, adjust. Ryan hugged. Mark, Jason clapped him on the back. Luke greeted Emily with warmth, but she felt suddenly out of place, like she had packed for the wrong trip. As they waited for luggage, the men talked over each other plans, bars, skiing, group dinners. Emily stood there, holding her purse. Listening to her anniversary turn into a group schedule. The drive to the resort was loud. Music played. Jokes flew. Emily watched the mountains pass by. Still beautiful, still steady, but now distant. Mark drove ahead with Jason, leaving Emily to ride with Ryan and Luke. Ryan noticed her silence. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm just tired," she said, which was partly true. The resort was exactly how she remembered it. Warm wood, wide windows, the lake visible in the distance, like a quiet promise. Emily's heart lifted for a second, then dropped when she saw the room assignments. Separate rooms. Shared plans. No mention of time alone. That evening, the group gathered by the fire pit. Drinks were passed around. Stories grew louder as the sky darkened. Emily sat wrapped in a blanket, the firelight flickering across her face. She watched Mark laugh with his friends, watched how easy it was for him to be present there. She wondered when it became so hard for him to be present with her. Ryan noticed again. He offered her a cup of hot chocolate instead of another drink. "You don't have to stay if you don't want to," he said quietly. "I know," Emily replied. "I just didn't expect to feel alone here." Across the fire, Mark caught her eye for a moment. She waited for him to come over. He didn't. Someone told a joke, and the moment passed. Later, in their room, Emily stood at the window and looked out at the lake. The water was dark now, calm, untouched by noise. Mark came out of the bathroom, still smiling, still energized. "Wasn't that great?" he asked. "Everyone's in such a good mood." Emily turned slowly. "Did you plan any time for us?" she asked, careful, quiet. Mark hesitated. "We have time," he said. "We're here for days. Days filled with people, plans, noise." Emily nodded again, but something inside her settled, heavy and still. She lay awake that night, listening to Mark breathe beside her, wondering how two people could share a bed and still feel miles apart. The next morning, Emily woke before sunrise. She dressed quietly and slipped outside. The air was cold and clean. The lake stretched wide and silent, reflecting the early light. She sat on a bench and let herself feel everything she had been holding back: disappointment, love, longing, and a sadness she couldn't name. Footsteps approached. Ryan stood nearby, hands in his pockets. "Couldn't sleep either," he said. They talked without forcing it, about life, about how things change, about how sometimes people mean well but forget to listen. Ryan didn't say much, but he listened in a way that felt rare. Back at the resort, the group planned a hike. Emily claimed a headache and stayed behind. Mark barely noticed, distracted by maps and excitement. Emily watched them leave, then sat on the bed and stared at her suitcase. She didn't unpack. Instead, she folded her clothes carefully, as if order might help her think. She wasn't leaving Tahoe, not yet. But she needed space. She needed to decide if this trip was a mistake. When Mark returned hours later, sunburned and cheerful, he stopped short when he saw her packed bag. "What's going on?" he asked. Emily looked at him, calm but tired. "I thought this trip was about us," she said. "I didn't know I'd have to compete with your friends for your attention." Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, he didn't rush to explain. Outside, the lake shimmered in the late afternoon light, steady and quiet, waiting. And Emily realized that this vacation, meant as a surprise, might be about to change more than either of them planned. Emily woke to the quiet sound of the lake lapping against the shore, the early sunlight spilling across the mountains. She didn't rush. She hadn't felt this calm in months, maybe years. The resort was still asleep, and for once she had it all to herself. The thought made her chest ache in a way that was both freeing and frightening. She wanted to savor it, but the memory of last night, the fire, the laughter, the way Mark had barely noticed her, hovered in her mind. She pulled on a sweater and walked down to the water, letting her bare feet touch the cool sand. The lake reflected the sky perfectly, and for a moment she felt the hope she had carried onto this trip stir again. Footsteps crunched behind her. She turned to see Ryan approaching, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. He smiled gently, careful, like he didn't want to break the peace she had found. "Couldn't sleep either," he said softly, stopping a few feet away. Emily shook her head. "I needed to get out," she admitted. "Just be alone with the lake." Ryan nodded and sat on the bench beside her without asking. For a while, there was silence. The kind of silence that isn't awkward but real, that lets you think and breathe at the same time. Emily looked at the water and then back at him. She realized how rare it was to find someone willing to just sit and listen without judgment or expectation. "You love him," Ryan said suddenly, breaking the quiet, "but you feel invisible." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "How do you know that?" Ryan shrugged, looking at the lake. "Because it shows. In your eyes. In the way you stay quiet when he's around his friends. People don't stop loving. They just stop reaching sometimes. I've seen it before." Emily felt a lump in her throat. He wasn't wrong. For months, maybe longer, she had been waiting for Mark to notice her again, to remember what it felt like when they first fell in love. And now, with the surprise trip, she thought they'd get that moment back, but instead, she had felt more alone than ever. Ryan didn't push. They talked quietly about small things: first work, the scenery, the little adventures they might take on their own. And slowly, the conversation grew deeper, filled with emotions Emily hadn't voiced to anyone in years. She spoke about the distance she felt, the way love can be loud in memory, but soft in daily life. She spoke about longing, heartbreak, and hope without realizing how much of her own heart she was giving away. Later, the group decided to take a long hike. Emily stayed behind, claiming a headache, though her real reason was different. She didn't want to spend the day distracted by forced cheerfulness or crowded trails. She wanted to be alone, to breathe, to understand how she felt. As she watched the others leave, Mark joking with Jason and Luke, she realized that this vacation, meant to surprise her and rekindle their love, had instead made the distance between them impossible to ignore. Hours passed. Emily wandered along the edge of the lake, thinking about the years behind them and the choices ahead. When Mark returned to their room, carrying souvenirs and stories, he stopped when he saw her sitting quietly, her bag still packed. The room smelled faintly of the pinewood floors and the lake air. "Emily," he asked cautiously, noticing the serious tone in her eyes. "Everything okay?" She nodded, though her heart was pounding. "This trip," she began, her voice steady, "was supposed to be about us. About celebrating us. I didn't expect to feel like I was competing for your attention." Mark looked down, clearly caught off guard. I thought bringing my friends would make it fun." "I didn't realize that you didn't think," Emily finished softly. "That's exactly it." For a moment, no one spoke. The air between them was thick, charged with emotions that hadn't been voiced before. Emily watched him carefully. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't angry. He was listening, really listening, in a way that mattered more than any words could. They sat together on the edge of the bed, Mark reaching for her hand, unsure but willing. Emily led him, feeling a connection she hadn't felt in months. The room was quiet, the world outside moving too fast to notice them. She realized that sometimes love doesn't vanish, just waits for someone to notice again, to reach, to understand. That evening, Emily suggested canceling the group dinner. Mark hesitated but agreed. For the first time, they walked together along the lake, just the two of them, the sun melting into the horizon. The water mirrored the sky's colors, brilliant oranges and pinks, like the world itself was giving them a second chance. They didn't need grand gestures. No plans, no speeches. Just walking, talking, sharing glances that spoke more than words ever could. Emily told him about her fears, her loneliness, her desire to feel seen. He listened, apologized, and promised to try not just with words but with actions. The lake stayed calm behind them, and Emily felt a weight lift from her chest. This trip hadn't gone as planned, but it had shown her something important. That love is not about surprises or friends or perfectly executed plans. It's about noticing each other every day, even when life gets busy. As the stars appeared over Tahoe, Emily leaned against Mark's shoulder. There were no magic solutions, no immediate fixes, but there was connection, understanding, and a promise that they could find their way back. And for Emily, that was enough to hold on to. She realized as they walked back to the resort that vacations can teach more than relaxation ever could. Sometimes they teach truths. And sometimes they show us how far we can still reach for each other when we think it's too late. That night, in their quiet room, Emily finally slept with a heart that felt lighter. Knowing that love was still alive in, if it needed to be reminded who it belonged to. Tahoe, with all its beauty, all its calm, had given her clarity. And she wasn't going to waste it. The lake glimmered outside, steady and eternal. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt she could be steady too, with Mark and with herself. Their anniversary wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes real is better than perfect.